South Col, Everest, 7,900 meters. A climber collapses. He can't move, can't descend on his own. At this altitude, the protocol is clear. You leave them. Rescue isn't possible. 6 Sherpas turn around anyway. They abandon their own summit bids, drag the man down 800 vertical meters, and donate their oxygen to keep him alive. The effort takes 6 hours. The rescue itself becomes a death zone event. This happens because Sherpas aren't climbing Everest the way clients do. They're working there, and the work is brutal. At 8,000 meters, your body stops digesting food. Sleep becomes suffocation. Making water takes an hour. Sherpas pass through the icefall 40 times per season. Clients pass through 8 times. This is how they survive it. Sherpas are biologically different, not tougher or more experienced, different at the cellular level. A significant portion of the Sherpa population possesses a genetic variant called EPAS1, and it fundamentally changes how their body responds to low oxygen. When a person from sea level ascends to altitude, their body panics. It detects low oxygen and begins producing more red blood cells, trying to capture more of what's available. The problem is that this response thickens the blood, forcing the heart to work exponentially harder to pump it. The risk of stroke and heart failure increases. This is the lowlander response, and it's why most people struggle, suffer, and sometimes die at high altitude. The EPAS1 variant prevents this overproduction. Sherpa blood remains thin. It flows easily. The heart isn't overworked, but the advantage goes deeper than circulation. Their mitochondria, the cellular power plants, are vastly more efficient at extracting energy from available oxygen. They get more output per molecule. They also burn glucose more efficiently as fuel, which matters in an environment where every calorie counts. The practical outcome: a Sherpa guide can perform strenuous physical work at 8,000 meters with an output that a foreign climber, even one on supplemental oxygen, could barely match. They are, in a measurable and documented sense, better built for this environment. But this genetic advantage is not immunity. A Sherpa from a low-altitude village like Phakding at 2,910 meters must still acclimatize just like anyone else. The process is typically faster and more robust, but it's not optional. The body must be exposed to stress at high altitude and then recover at a lower altitude. The difference is that Sherpas start with a better engine. The mountain still demands respect from everyone. Before any client sets foot on Everest, the infrastructure already exists. The fixed ropes, the ladder bridges, the established route through the chaos. None of it is natural. It's all built by Sherpas, and it's rebuilt every season. The Khumbu Icefall is the gateway to the climbing route. It's a 2,000-foot tall, 1.5-mile-long section of glacial ice that sits between base camp and the start of the actual mountain, but it's not stable ice. It's a glacier, a river of ice moving several feet per day. The movement creates a constantly shifting maze of seracs, which are building-sized towers of ice, and crevasses, which are deep cracks that can be hidden under a thin layer of snow. The icefall doctors are an elite, specialized team of Sherpas whose job is to enter this maze before the climbing season starts. They carry ropes and aluminum ladders. Their task: find the safest or least dangerous path through the shifting ice and build a road. They lash 3 or 4 ladders together to bridge massive crevasses. They anchor fixed ropes to ice screws and stakes so climbers have a handrail to clip into. This work is done without the benefit of an established route because they are the ones creating it. Above the icefall, other teams take over. From base camp to the 848-meter summit, thousands of meters of rope must be fixed to the mountain. On the Lhotse face, a 4,000-foot wall of sheer blue ice, a lead Sherpa climbs without a safety line, hammering ice screws into the frozen surface, attaching rope, and continuing to the next anchor point. They're carrying heavy coils of rope while doing this. It's exhausting, high-stakes work performed in extreme conditions, and it's the unseen infrastructure that makes every single expedition possible. Without it, the mountain is unclimbable. While clients are still at home training and preparing, Sherpas are already on the mountain. The acclimatization rotations that clients will eventually do as part of their preparation are, for Sherpas, the job itself. Before a client even arrives at base camp, the Sherpa team has been making carries. Repeated trips up to Camp 1 at roughly 6,000 meters and Camp 2 at roughly 6,400 meters. They're hauling loads of 25 to 40 kilograms. These aren't personal packs. These are expedition supplies, tents, fuel canisters, oxygen bottles that weigh 7 pounds each when full, food, cooking equipment, and often the client's extra gear that they don't want to carry themselves. The Sherpas use a technique involving a strap that rests on the forehead to help distribute the immense weight from the shoulders. They move at a steady, rhythmic pace, deliberately conserving energy. The ability to do this kind of load-bearing work at 6,000 to 7,000 meters is what defies belief. They're not just surviving at altitude, they're performing hard physical labor in an environment where most people can barely walk. These carries serve a dual purpose. They stock the high camps with everything needed for the expedition to function, but they also acclimatize the Sherpa team. By the time clients start their first rotation to Camp 1, the Sherpas have already been up and down the lower half of the mountain a dozen times. Their bodies have built the necessary adaptations: increased capillary density, higher concentrations of oxygen-binding enzymes, improved efficiency in every system. The clients are just beginning to develop these changes. The Sherpas are already operating at full capacity. This is why they appear tireless. It's not that they don't feel the altitude, it's that by the time you see them working, they've already done the brutal conditioning work that you're about to start. Everest Base Camp sits at 5,364 meters. That's higher than any peak in the continental United States. For clients arriving from sea level, Base Camp is a place of headaches, nausea, breathless exhaustion, and sleepless nights. For Sherpas, after their initial acclimatization period, it becomes something else: an operational home. The difference is partly genetic, partly experiential, and entirely functional. At base camp, Sherpas can still eat with appetite. They can sleep with some degree of actual rest. They can recover. This is the last altitude where those things are reliably possible. The diet here is built around dal bhat, which is the non-negotiable fuel of the Himalayas. It's a massive plate of steamed rice, lentil soup, and usually a side of spinach or potato curry. Sherpas eat this at least twice a day. The mantra is dal bhat power, 24-hour, and it's not just cultural tradition, it's nutritionally perfect for the environment. High carbohydrates for immediate energy, protein for muscle repair, liquid for hydration. The meal is designed for recovery, and it works. Garlic soup is the other staple, considered both food and medicine. Garlic is believed to aid acclimatization by acting as a mild blood thinner. It's also calorie-dense, comforting, and hydrating. In an environment this cold and dry, hot liquids aren't just pleasant, they're survival tools. Hydration at base camp is a full-time job. The air at 5,000 plus meters is drier than the Sahara Desert. With every breath, the body loses moisture. Sherpas must consciously force themselves to drink 4 to 6 liters of water, tea, and juice per day. Dehydration thickens the blood, which is the primary trigger for acute mountain sickness. The body's demand for liquid is constant and non-negotiable. Base camp, for all its discomforts, is the last place where eating, drinking, and sleeping function somewhat normally. Above this altitude, everything changes. Above 6,000 meters, the body begins to shut down. Digestion is one of the first systems to go. The physiological response to extreme oxygen deprivation is to divert all available resources to critical functions. Heart, lungs, brain, everything else becomes expendable. Appetite vanishes. Food stops tasting like anything. The idea of eating becomes nauseating. For Sherpas working at Camp 2 or Camp 3, eating becomes a chore they must force themselves to perform. They know that not eating is the beginning of a fatal spiral. Muscle wasting starts almost immediately at high altitude. A climber can burn over 15,000 calories on a heavy day, and the body will start consuming its own tissue for fuel if it's not fed. The menu at high camps is lightweight and simple. Instant noodles, freeze-dried meals, biscuits, chocolate, energy bars. Anything that can be prepared with hot water is preferred because making hot water is itself a major undertaking. Melting snow is the most time-consuming and critical task at altitude. A stove must run for an hour to produce just a few liters of water. This is fuel-intensive, time-intensive, and absolutely essential. The output is used for drinking, for rehydrating freeze-dried food, and for thermoses of hot tea. A Sherpa in the tent vestibule running the stove for an hour while the wind screams outside is performing life support for the entire team. Sleep becomes the other battle. Above 6,000 meters, the low oxygen in the blood triggers a condition called Cheney-Stokes respiration. The pattern is this. Breathing becomes rapid for a moment, then it slows, then it stops completely. For 15 to 30 seconds, there's no breath at all. The brain's oxygen sensors finally panic and send a jolt, causing the person to suddenly gasp and choke awake. This cycle repeats all night long. True, deep, restorative REM sleep is impossible. Rest is just a series of panicked gasps, light dozing, and shivering in a tent where the inside temperature is 30 degrees below 0 Celsius. Condensation from breathing freezes on the tent fabric. In the morning, when the sun hits the tent, the frost melts and it rains inside. Sherpas sleep fully clothed in down suits rated for 8,000 meters, inside sleeping bags rated for the same. They don't get ready for bed, they simply crawl into the bag and endure. This is why supplemental oxygen is sometimes used for sleeping at Camp 3 at 7,100 meters and almost always at Camp 4. It's not about comfort. It's about surviving the night without the body suffocating itself in sleep. The Khumbu Icefall is the single most dangerous section of the Everest climbing route. It's also unavoidable. Every person going up the mountain must pass through it. But the frequency of exposure is where the real risk lies. The icefall is not static, it's moving. The glacier shifts several feet every day, and that movement creates instability. Seracs, those building-sized ice towers, are held in place by friction and cold. When the sun warms the ice during the day, the glue begins to melt. Collapse becomes more likely. Crevasses open and close. The terrain literally changes between morning and evening. For this reason, all movement through the icefall is restricted to the early morning hours, typically between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. The ice is coldest and most stable during this window. Climbers move through in the dark, headlamps cutting through the blackness. The only sound, the crunch of crampons on ice and the creak of the glacier beneath them. A client making a standard Everest expedition will pass through the icefall approximately 6 to 8 times, once or twice during acclimatization rotations, and then again during the final summit push-up and back down. Each passage takes several hours. Each one is a gamble. Seracs can collapse without warning. Ladders can shift. Crevasses can open underfoot. A Sherpa working as a load carrier will pass through the icefall 30 to 40 times in a single season. Every carry to Camp 1 or Camp 2 requires a round trip through the icefall. Every rope-fixing mission, every emergency supply run, the statistical exposure is 5 times greater than what a client faces. This disparity is the single largest factor in Sherpa mortality on Everest. They are playing a game of probability, and they're playing it dozens of times more than anyone else. The icefall doesn't care about experience, skill, or preparation. It's objective risk. You can do everything right and still be in the wrong place when a serac lets go. Sherpas know this. They move quickly, efficiently, and they don't linger, but they can't avoid it. The icefall is the gate, and passing through it repeatedly is the job. At 8,000 meters, 26,247 feet, you cross a threshold. This altitude is known as the death zone, a term coined by Swiss physician Edouard Weiss-Dunant in 1952. Above 8,000 meters, there is not enough oxygen pressure in the air to sustain human life. The air density is roughly 1/3 of what it is at sea level. At this altitude, acclimatization stops working. Your body is no longer adapting, it's dying. Cell by cell, the body enters deficit. Digestion has completely stopped. The body begins consuming its own muscle tissue for fuel. The summit push from Camp 4 is called a push because you cannot live at 8,000 meters. You can only pass through and get back down before your body fails. Camp 4 is located on the South Col at roughly 7,900 meters. It's a desolate, wind-scoured plateau littered with the shredded, frozen remains of tents from decades of expeditions. This is the launch pad. Everyone, clients and Sherpas, begins using supplemental oxygen here. The mask is claustrophobic. The regulator often freezes, but without it, most people would not survive the night, let alone attempt the summit. For Sherpas, the job becomes exponentially harder in the death zone. They are not just managing their own survival, they are monitoring their client's oxygen system. They are carrying extra oxygen bottles in case the client runs out or a regulator fails. They are the ones making critical decisions: when to turn around, when to push forward, whether the client is capable of continuing, while the client becomes hypoxic, confused, and sometimes irrational or combative. The Sherpa's physiological advantage matters most here. Their bodies are still functioning at a higher level than their clients. Even with supplemental oxygen, their thinking is clearer, their physical output is greater, but they are still in the death zone. They are still degrading, just at a slower rate. If a client's oxygen system fails, the Sherpa will often, without hesitation, give the client their own mask and bottle. This is not dramatic heroism. It's a routine part of the job. The Sherpa carries extra oxygen specifically for this possibility, but giving up their own supply means they are now climbing on a thinner margin. They are risking their own survival to ensure the client's. The summit push from Camp 4 to the top and back down must happen quickly. The descent must happen immediately after reaching the summit. There is no lingering. Every minute above 8,000 meters reduces the body's remaining capacity. For clients, the summit is the goal. For Sherpas, the summit is halfway. The job is getting everyone back down alive. When someone collapses above 8,000 meters, the standard mountaineering protocol is clear. You leave them. Rescue from the death zone is considered impossible. Moving a non-ambulatory person down thousands of feet of steep ice and rock in sub-zero temperatures with minimal oxygen is beyond what most teams will attempt. The calculus is rational. Attempting a rescue will likely kill the rescuers. Sherpas don't follow that calculus. When one of their own or a client they are responsible for collapses in the death zone, they mount a rescue. This happens not because they are reckless, but because the bond between Sherpa team members is deeper than an employment contract. Many Sherpa teams are composed of brothers, cousins, and neighbors from the same villages, Thame and Fortsey. They have climbed together for decades. They communicate in their native Sherpa language, which is distinct from Nepali. They have an innate, non-verbal understanding of each other's condition and capability. A death zone rescue works like this. 6 to 10 Sherpas will abandon their own summit bids to form a rescue team. They bring extra oxygen bottles and a makeshift sled, often just a sleeping bag or tarp. They physically drag, lower, and carry the victim one agonizing foot at a time down the mountain. This effort takes every one of them to their absolute physical limit and beyond. They will donate their own oxygen. They will suffer frostbite from prolonged exposure. They will push their bodies into the same deficit state that claimed the victim. The rescue itself becomes a second death zone event, with 10 lives now at risk instead of 1. But they do it anyway. The Sherpa framework for this work is not purely pragmatic. Many Sherpas are devout Tibetan Buddhists, and this provides a deep well of resilience. There is a concept of karma, cause and effect, and a degree of fatalism. What will be, will be. Before every expedition, teams participate in a puja ceremony, a blessing from a lama, and a request for safe passage to Myolang Sangma, the mountain goddess. This is not performative. It's a critical spiritual and psychological preparation for the work ahead. But the spiritual framework exists alongside a very practical reality. Sherpas are working. Their income, and especially their summit bonus, is often tied to the client's success. This creates immense economic pressure. There is pressure to push a client who may not be physically capable. There is pressure to ignore bad weather because turning around means no bonus. The Sherpa's judgment, honed by years of experience and superior physiological clarity at altitude, is often overridden by economic necessity. The cost of this work is visible in the Khumbu cough, a violent hacking that comes from cold, dry air, damaging the bronchial tubes. Climbers cough so hard they tear abdominal muscles or crack ribs. The cost is visible in frostbite. Fingers, toes, noses lost because a Sherpa gave their warmer gloves to a client. The cost is visible in snow blindness from UV radiation that burns the corneas after just minutes of exposure without glacier glasses. And the cost is visible in the bodies. Sherpas must climb past the frozen, preserved corpses of climbers from previous seasons. Sometimes these are friends. The normalization of death requires a specific, powerful mental framework. You do the work. You honor the dead by not becoming one of them. You focus on the mission, and the mission is not the summit. For the client, the summit is the finish line, the achievement, the story. For the Sherpa, the summit is just the turnaround point. Success is measured in safe returns to base camp, to the valley, to the village, to the family waiting below. The media will always celebrate the client who reached the top. The unseen story is the dozens of trips through the icefall, the hours spent melting snow, the nights of gasping for air, the loads carried, the ropes fixed, the decisions made when the client's brain was shutting down. The story is the sacrifice that makes someone else's dream possible. The word Sherpa has become shorthand for guide or supporter in Western culture. It's used casually, often without awareness of what the work actually entails. But on Everest, being a Sherpa is not a metaphor. It's a trade practiced at the edge of human survival in an environment where every basic function, eating, sleeping, breathing, is work. They do it with a genetic advantage that took thousands of years to evolve. They do it with acclimatization earned through repeated brutal exposure. They do it with a spiritual framework that allows them to confront death as routine. And they do it because, for many, this is the only viable income in a region where economic opportunity is scarce. The commercial Everest industry exists because Sherpas make it exist. Without them, there are no fixed ropes, no stocked camps, no rescues, no summits. The infrastructure is invisible until you understand how it's built. The labor is invisible until you count the trips through the icefall. The cost is invisible until you see the frostbite, hear the cough, or learn the names of those who didn't come home. This is not a story about conquering mountains. It's a story about the people who carry others to the top while keeping their own eyes on getting everyone down safely, on the village, the family, the life waiting below. Their endurance is quiet, professional, and profound, and it's what makes the impossible possible for everyone else.